Welcome to episode 5963 of Brexit is a Blazing Skip. I'm here to interview the leader of Sinn Féin, Mary Lou McDonald. Now, I've actually interviewed her before.
When I say that Brexit is a disaster, I'm not saying it from the perspective of somebody who thinks that everything is fine and dandy and that the status quo must prevail.
Brexit has had a few more crises ever since then, but it hasn't just enveloped this crisis, the island of Britain, but also the island of Ireland. This is absolutely critical in terms of the future of the Irish peace process. That's one of the things I want to talk about. But I also want to say, or find out, what does this mean for Ireland and its future? And could it not actually bring forward or make more likely the great dream of Sinn Féin, a united Ireland?
Right, now, come here, before we do anything, I have to tell you, I laughed till my mascara was down here at this thing with your man from Wetherspoons.
Oh, good, Tim Martin. Cheeky question. You call Brexit crazy. I'm not a fan of Brexit either, I should say, campaign against it. But let me be a bit cheeky here.
Okay.
The main cause of Sinn Féin is a united Ireland. Is it or is it not the case that Brexit has made a united Ireland far more likely than if Brexit hadn't happened? So isn't it bittersweet? Aren't you there thinking, well, actually, we could get Irish unity out of this?
It's not bittersweet. I mean, we don't have a scorched earth policy as regards Irish unity. I don't take a simplistic view of the end justifying the means. And we are very conscious that we have an obligation to people in terms of jobs, in terms of the security of their families, their ability to turn the light on, to put bread on the table. And when we say that Brexit is hugely damaging for Ireland, we're not exaggerating. I mean, economically, in bread and butter terms, it's hugely damaging. And it is a direct challenge to the settlement, to the arrangements that we have democratically landed on. So, I mean, I'm an Irish Republican. I'm going to argue for Irish unity anyhow. There's changes afoot on the island of Ireland in terms of like demographics, which is not always my first port of call. I don't like this idea of, you know, outbreeding your opposition to get constitutional change. But the demographic trends are clear. But also the politics has changed on the island. There's a real sense of an appetite for progress and modernity and so on, which I think is really encouraging. And also, bear this in mind, the northern state was based on the premise of an inbuilt unionist majority forever and ever and ever. That's gone now. It's gone in the last two elections. So all of those things are in the mix. But if you ask me, am I secretly delighted that Brexit happened? The answer to that is no.
But there was a certain irony, isn't there? My mum actually, we won't put her in, she's in the room, she's visiting me at the moment. In the 1970s, she was part of the British left. Yeah. And two of their big causes, of course, were a radical socialist government and a united Ireland. There is a certain irony that the Tory Brexiteer right have made two of those things more likely.
There is. It's great, isn't it? Yeah, there is. I mean, it is quite something. I'll tell you what's even more amazing is that the Democratic Unionist Party have had such a hand in all of this. Your viewers should know that the DUP do not represent the views or the wishes of the majority of the people of the north of Ireland. They are a very strong political
Which century do they represent, would you say?
They represent, I think, in many senses, people who are prepared to tolerate just about anything and yet to vote for a party simply because they will trenchantly defend the union with Britain. And I respect people's rights to take that political position, that political view, to argue for the union. But, you know, it is the year 2019. We're not back in the 1600s. And it is, in my view, all kinds of crazy that people, rational, decent people, would tolerate a DUP agenda that's about denying rights to people. By the way, rights that are freely enjoyed here in Britain and freely enjoyed in the part of Ireland that I live in.
Like equal marriage, for example.
Well, equal marriage, women's health care, you know. We had a very significant change to our constitutional arrangements in terms of the Eighth Amendment, and access to abortion was quite a landmark in Irish politics. That always puzzles me, how it is that people would tolerate that that absolute insistence on denying people rights, as though recognising somebody's rights was any real cost to you. That doesn't diminish you, it just allows people to live freely.
There's often a basic lack of understanding of just the fundamentals of Irish politics and of the Republican movement.
Yep.
So if I ask, for example, on Twitter, what shall I ask the leader of Sinn Féin? A load of people go, why can't they just take their seats? Now, can you just, why can't they take their seats in Westminster? Can you clearly and succinctly explain to these people, no offence guys, read a book though, why that is not going to happen?
You see, what British people, and I say this with great affection, and particularly perhaps English people, and I say this with greater affection, Owen, need to understand is that...
Not all English, so
no,
carry on.
is that we were colonised.
Yeah.
And the border in Ireland was part of that colonial retreat from our country, and that it scarred Ireland and it divided us and it caused conflict and so on. So there's a long history to abstentionism. And I understand on a very superficial level, so, well, why in the name of God won't they come and sit at Parliament? But if I was to put it to somebody who is elected from your home constituency, which is...
my home, I grew up in Stockport.
Okay, Stockport. If say, well, why won't you go to France? And why won't you sit in the French? Why won't you sit in the French Parliament? You would see that as an absurdity, but it's equally so for us. You see, we're not kind of pretending that we're not British. Like, we genuinely aren't.
No.
And we genuinely have our own systems of government.
Within the context of hundreds of years of colonialism and, let's be honest, famine, mass murder.
It's not a reasonable ask for somebody to swear allegiance to a foreign power. That's crazy, and it's not going to happen.
Give a quick fire reaction to this. I'm going to name someone, and I want you to tell me exactly what you think when I say who they are. Karen Bradley, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Here's the issue. Karen has said things that are unhelpful, to say the least. I mean, I think particularly around actions of British soldiers in the north of Ireland.
She said it wasn't crimes.
Over 90% of the killings during the Troubles were at the hands of terrorists. Every single one of those was a crime. The fewer than 10% that were at the hands of the military and police were not crimes.
Terrible. I mean, absolutely awful. I'm not trying to do political, whataboutery or point scoring here. You see, for families who are desperately seeking some comfort and some truth and some justice, it was extremely hurtful. They were furious with her, actually. Here's the truth of it. The problem is much deeper than Karen Bradley. There's an all-of-government problem with their incapacity, their inability to actually either understand Ireland or to deal competently and honourably with the Irish question. That's the issue. That's the issue here. So even if Karen Bradley were to resign, that doesn't solve that problem.
From an Irish perspective, how catastrophic has Theresa May been, do you think, as a British Prime Minister, and particularly her handling of Brexit, which of course affects the island of Ireland so much?
The negotiating parties in the Brexit scenario have been the European institutions and the British government. So we are involved. Dublin and Ireland is involved, but it's not a bilateral discussion or negotiation. So you're left in a position where you're always desperately waiting for some conclusion, for some clarity, and yet that's not forthcoming. It's been very frustrating as well to have to endlessly repeat and describe and explain again and again things that ought to be patently obvious, like you don't undermine the Good Friday Agreement. I mean, I think it's kind of shocking.
Has Theresa May herself undermined it?
I think the whole Brexit process has undermined it. I think it's an internationally binding agreement, and that means that the British state has to honour its obligations, but we have to press that point with them. I just don't believe that all of us are just going to give up on Good Friday and allow a Tory Brexit to cut the legs under what we have achieved over decades.
Labour, Jeremy Corbyn, Brexit. How do you think he's handled it, and what would your message be to him? What do you want Labour to do in terms of particularly the issue of Brexit and Ireland?
Yeah. Well, I think Jeremy Corbyn, by contrast with others, actually does get Ireland and understands it very, very well. But also, we need to start moving the conversation onwards around the whole issue of constitutional change and a poll on unity. I accept that there will have to be a transition to the referendum, a transition beyond the referendum, but above all, I know that we need to start talking about this. Now, I've said this to the government in Dublin, but I think it holds true for London as well. Don't bury your head in the sand and hope that this is going to go away. The genie is out of the bottle. The debate is underway, and it's very, very important that people in Britain understand why there's a border in Ireland, what the issues are, and how we can move to unity.
Very lastly, if Sinn Féin formed a government in the south, we're both people who would prefer to stay in the EU, but Sinn Féin recognises there are problems with the EU in its current form.
Yeah.
You would have a radical policy, including economic policies, which could end up on a collision course with Eurozone rules, with the very stringent and reactionary fiscal rules, neoliberal harsh rules. What would you do about that?
If Brexit does anything, beyond our dilemma now around protecting Ireland and Irish interests, it raises a whole set of really fundamental questions about the European Union and the European project. Now, you and I would agree that this project has lost its way. I would advocate that strongly, and as you know, we've campaigned in countless referendum campaigns arguing against a European system that is solely and exclusively focused on the might of market and the imperative of competition. A European Union where there is a clash between the rights of the market and the social good, that the market inevitably prevails. Do you see, when Brexit, the dust settles,
if it ever does.
If it ever does, and as we move forward, I think we have a really important job, the people of Ireland and the people of Britain, progressives, to actually assist each other, because we have much more in common than divides us, and issues around human rights and workers' rights and a decent standard of living and a clean environment. We share all of that still, and we need to have mechanisms and ways of working together and supporting each other for those objectives. So I look forward to living in a free and united Ireland, for you and your mother to come and visit.
We'll be there.
Maybe stay a while.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And for us to actually...
Might defect at this point.
And to place on a sustainable basis really good relationships and friendships between the great British people and the Irish people.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. British politics at the best of times can be very parochial, very insular. Ever since Brexit, that's got, I think we'd all agree, quite a lot worse. Which way we go? Is this the way out? Oh yes, it is the way out. So it's very important that the Irish voices are heard whatever happens going forward with this fascinating and thrilling ride we're currently on. But I want to hear your thoughts. Do leave your comments. I'm sure they will be, many of them, very interesting and provocative. Just saying. But as ever, we've got loads of interviews coming up. Leave your suggestions about who you want me to chat to. But also, click on the ones we've done, because they're great, some of them. Some are better than others. As ever, subscribe, spread the word. I'll see you next time.